Hi guys, and welcome to my channel. So in front of me today, I have these watercolors. These are handmade watercolors from Poems About You on Etsy. I am going to be trying them today, letting you guys know what I think about them, and just painting a picture and talking about watercolor in general. So let's go ahead and get this review started. I'm going to unbox these, take out all of the paints. This is what they look like. So this is the color Indian Yellow. I did the make your own watercolor set, and then you get a free tin box if you order like at least 6, and I ordered 20 colors. They range in price from like $7 each to, I think the most expensive I got was $9. So the colors that I got were Indian Yellow, Lemon Yellow, Yellow Ochre, Raw Sienna, Indigo Extract, Prussian Blue, Albrecht Blue, Raw Umber, Cobalt Purple Tyrian, Alizarin Red Lake, Burnt Umber, Cadmium Red, Rose Madder, Phthalo Blue, Hooker's Green, Sap Green, Mayan Green Genuine, Antique Pink, Red Earth, and Ultramarine Blue Dark. And in total for 20 paints, it cost $160. So if you're creating your own watercolor set and you're ordering individual paints, then it's important to take note of the colors that you use when you paint and the colors that you tend to use a lot. A good way to do this, if you don't know, is just go look at your paint palette and look at the ones that you're using up the fastest. That's going to give you a little bit of an idea of the colors that you use as, the more frequently. So this is what I ended up coming up with that fit into my budget and also my style. So this website, this Etsy store, Poems About You, is based in Washington, D.C. They have a 5-star rating with over 3,000 reviews. They've been on Etsy since 2018, and they have nearly 15,000 sales. By the way, I'm going to be using this Peebo drawing gum. I'm applying it to the wet paper with this little like rubber stick that I have it's from the pottery section. And that's going to spread out in that water, and then I'm going to let it dry. And then when I put paint on top, I'll get a really cool effect with that masking fluid, just so you're aware of what I'm doing right now on the screen. So if you take a look at the About page, the owner's name is Lena, and they make their own watercolors. It's a small one-woman business, which is really, really awesome. So they're a big proponent of single pigment colors. So all of these, I believe, are single pigment colors, and all of them also use the original pigment names as the color names. They don't use marketing names. They find that it's easier for you to find it and to be able to know what you're mixing if they're using the actual pigment name. So that's really useful. You know exactly what pigment is in your paint. It's really helpful to know that, especially in like academic environments. It states that the watercolors are professional grade and can be used for serious study of pigments, color theory, and painting practice. It can accompany a long-term commitment to painting and gradual mastery of this medium. And if you look at the individual listings, they all have different information for this specific paint. So it'll tell you what is in all of the paints from the binder, which will be, it looks like it's usually gum arabic, organic honey, then they use some organic essential oil. And then there's natural earth pigments, and it tells you more about them depending on which specific paint you're looking at. And then it has the specs, whether it's light fast or how light fast it is. Every pigment varies, whether it granulates or not, whether it's staining, how transparent or opaque it is, whether it's semi-opaque, opaque, whatever, and the specific pigment. As you saw from the swatches at the beginning, the paints that I got were a variety of different translucencies. Some, I think the Red Earth was the one that I'm remembering, was much more opaque due to the pigment in it, and then some were way more translucent. And that's all listed on the description so that you know when you buy it. So I really, really feel like this is catering towards artists, especially that really like to be specific with their pigment mixing. I know my mom is somebody like that. And for people that really, really pay attention to that kind of stuff, this could be really, really something that would be a great place for you to look into if you're interested in trying some homemade paints and supporting a small business, one woman small business. So that's very cool. So that's kind of the info, the down low about the paints from the actual Etsy store. And now let's talk about how I used them and my overall thoughts and impressions and what we're doing over here. So we're already 5 minutes into the video, so I'm going to give a quick little catch up on what's happening. I already talked a little bit about that masking fluid technique that I used at the beginning, and you saw me use that same masking fluid technique again on these clouds that this girl is kind of standing in. And then I also used more masking fluid with a masking fluid pen to create this mandala in the center. And you're going to see me use masking fluid a lot in this piece in a lot of different layers, because something that I wanted to work with in this piece was layers, and that was really important for me. Whenever I'm testing out a paint, I like to see how well it can layer, because if paints don't layer well, then they don't tend to work very well for my specific type of painting style. And luckily, these layered so beautifully. At this point, I took off that first layer of masking fluid, but not the mandala, just these little planets. And then I drew more mandalas onto these two little planetary type orbs. And that is what I'm going to go back over with another layer of masking fluid, so that then when I remove that, I will have this kind of multi-layered, almost faded design that's left peeking through. While we're close up in on this mandala, you can really see some of the granulation that I was able to get with these paints. So a little bit ago, you saw me add some salt, and that's what I was able to do to get all of these pretty kind of crystal effects that are happening in the background right now. But all of that granulation, all of the different modeled textures, that is from the paint itself. It's from those pigments settling into the paper. And if anyone is curious, I am using the Arche paper for this. Or actually, I think it's pronounced arches. I think it's actually pronounced arches. I think I've been corrected on this multiple times and I keep forgetting. So these paints performed absolutely beautifully, as I was hoping they would. And I was very pleasantly, not even surprised, just pleasantly gratified. I was like, oh, good. I spent my money in a good place, because you spend half your birthday money and you're like, okay, I hope I like these paints, right? So they are very, very pigmented. Some that are a little bit more translucent did need a little bit more pigment buildup. The Mayan Green Genuine, I think, was one of them. And then others needed way, way, way less, like the Red Earth, because that one had so much pigment. But I keep hitting my glass. But overall, they were very, very, very pigmented. Most of them had a really beautiful granulation. Obviously, some pigments are going to granulate more than others. Some pigments don't really granulate as much, but they were all really, really beautiful in the way that they laid on the page. And I didn't find that they got muddy too quickly. Overall, I felt like they were really comparable to pretty much most of the high-end artist quality professional paints that I've painted with in my life, including Dan Smith. They do have an interesting texture when in the actual pan. It's more of a kind of soft matte satin kind of look or feel, and they're a little bubbly looking on top. But that's just the way they look in the pan, and they perform beautifully. So I think that is just a curiosity of the handmade nature, and I think they are really, really wonderful to paint with. I'm very excited to paint with them in the future as well. What I actually did, so these paints do come with a little magnet on the bottom, and they come in that little magnetic tray, tin, whatever. But what I actually did was I took them out, and I ended up having a separate little container because I bought a new one and I moved some paints around. So I moved them all into that just because it kept them in place a little bit easier, and it had built-in mixing wells. But it does come with that little travel pan. So I've kept that around so I can kind of throw them in there if I want to. Or if I want to expand, I can do that. So I really, really found that the darker colors were nice and rich, and I got a lot of really good payoff from them, which was very nice for me. I get extremely frustrated if I have to layer up dark colors like indigos a lot. If I have to layer that up a bunch, a lot of times it can get muddy, and I really don't want muddiness in my shadows. It can be really easy for your shadows to get muddy. So I really found that these worked well for that as well. Overall, I had a really pleasant experience with these paints. They were everything that I was expecting them to be, and they fully live up to, like I said, they fully lived up to my expectations. I would compare them to any high quality professional paint that I have tried. They are professional quality pigment based paints, and I definitely recommend them. I actually think that the price is pretty freaking affordable, especially compared to other professional paints in the industry, and the fact that it is a one woman owned business, small business. I think that's great. You know, I love to support that. I have tried other handmade paints here and I love them as well. I just think it's great that there's so many different paint makers out there, and they all have different formulas, which means all of the paints perform slightly differently, and they may granulate differently and things like that. It's just really cool, and I really want to try more handmade art supplies, whether it be paints, paper, brushes. So if you do have any recommendations for any other handmade companies, small businesses, Etsy companies, anything like that, please let me know. Ones that are selling art supplies specifically, that's what I'm looking for, is like supplies to test and try out. Because usually when we go to the store, what we see is the mainstream paints that everyone can get their hands on and access to, like they're just right there. But the internet has made it so that all of us can get access to so many more things now, and it's great to try them. And I feel pretty lucky that I was able to like, I don't know, try these paints for you guys and then be able to say, oh no, these are good, or oh no, these are bad, or whatever, so that you're not, you know, like, I don't know, I just like being able to review things because it's hard with the internet. Like, what if you don't like it, right? So, Alice stamp of approval on these guys. I do think they're beautiful paints. I do think I will continue to use them. And overall, I had a really good experience with them. They were able to lift where I needed them to, but they weren't like lifting when I didn't want them to, if that makes sense. You know, when you're trying to layer and then things are lifting and it's really frustrating. That didn't happen to me. This piece took a long time. I was working on this piece for quite a few weeks, so my memory is a little bit fuzzy. So I'm sorry if this review isn't as detailed as I would like it to be, but I also just don't have any specific complaints that stick out in my head. It felt like I was using like paints that I've used 1,000 times. It felt really comfortable and it felt really easy. So I've noticed that in some handmade paints, depending on the pigment, depending on the color, you can have more of like a graininess of the actual pigment pieces still being in there that you can still see. Whether that bothers you or not is a personal decision, but I didn't notice that as much in this, but they did still really granulate nicely. So I think that's kind of it on the paints. Like, honestly, they're just very solid professional quality paints, which makes sense, like just based on, you know, the reviews and how well the shop clearly seems to be doing. So good job. I enjoyed the paints. I'm going to talk real quick about this painting in the last few minutes of the video. I haven't fully decided what I'm calling this painting, but essentially it's about just being at peace. I referenced the image from a magazine advertisement from like a 2016 Cosmo or something, probably earlier than that, probably like 2012. And then everything else I just kind of like made up and changed all the colors and things like that and just let my mind wander. This was shortly after December died is when I started on this, and this kind of piece carried me through that whole after process. This was a lot of my more like after mourning kind of like processing artwork, you know, and I realized I kind of had a little bit of a life revelation about that I want to paint peace into my life, in the sense that I really want to try to continue to bring things into my life that bring me joy and happiness and peace, whether that's something small like a succulent plant or a little crystal, or something big, you know, like being able to work from home and be a YouTuber and, you know, independent artist and fighting to make sure that that's still able to happen. So, you know, I feel like there was almost this clarity and peace that I was able to achieve, and it was really nice. And I tried to paint it into artwork, and I hope that you can kind of see that peacefulness that I tried to put in here. Yeah, I think that's it. I hope you like this video. I'm sorry if it was a little all over the place. It's been a while. I've just been making the palettefull videos and I feel a little off, but I'm excited to be back. I am streaming on Twitch all the time right now. So if you would like to follow my Twitch, I will link that in the description box below. So check me out there. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. And as always, have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.